Good afternoon, everyone. As we come into week 3 for our summer 2020 Music 101 course, it dawned on me I haven't taught this short course in a while. I teach this class all the time. I've taught it for over 30 years, but I haven't taught the short one in a while. And it's a little tougher in the 5-week cycle. And you're coming into the hardest week, week 3. Week 3 covers chapters 5 and chapter 6. Chapter 5, the classical era, Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven. This is the core of everything we've been building to, and it's everything that's going to happen for the rest of the semester. The formal structures here are critical. Understanding that just the basic building blocks, the techniques that we devise, particularly in instrumental music, but also in opera to an extent, we're going to build on that from here to the end of the semester. So it's really critical that you grasp all of this. The music's also getting longer. Chapter 5 in particular, you'll hear that the pieces get longer and more dramatic, and really they explode in chapter 6 in the Romantic period. So I want to take you through both chapters real quick, give you a quick overview of some of the most important stuff you're going to cover. First of all, you've been seeing these links throughout the semester, but here they're absolutely critical and you'll find them very useful. Classic FM is a great website with tons of material. When you click on this and open it, it takes you to a myriad of pages, some with sound, some with video, some with really interesting detailed history facts, some with cool gossipy facts about the people's daily lives, which is pretty fascinating. And there's just mountains of it here. So as you want to dig deeper into this music, this is a great place to start, both for video, audio recording, and just good information too. Probably the thing that's most important is this first focus on form. I still call it pages 106 and 107 because in the print book, that's the page numbers. Of course, here in the HTML world, we don't have page numbers. But this deals with the Sonata Cycle. The Sonata Cycle is a multi-movement work that develops in the classical period. It's drawn from the Baroque period, from the Italian overture, 3 sections, fast, slow, fast. Now we have 3 movements, fast, slow, fast. Now wait a minute, there's 4 movements here. Yeah, you're absolutely right. They derived this from that 3-section fast, slow, fast format. They ended up making it 3 movements, fast, slow, fast, but then they started sometimes, not always, adding what we call a dancey movement, drawing from the minuet and trio, and then later Beethoven makes it more dramatic, makes it the scherzo and trio, and we add this little 3rd movement in. We don't always use it, and so if you see a 3-movement structure, it's going to be this first movement, sonata form, I'll get to that in a minute, a slow second movement, it can be any one of these formal structures, and then a fast, really dramatic last movement. Again, it could be sonata form, rondo, theme and variation, could be a lot of different stuff. So first movement, second movement, third movement, if there's 3 movements. First movement, second movement, the 3rd movement is a dancing movement, and the 4th movement becomes that really fast, dramatic final movement. So either way, it's still drawn from that Italian overture structure. We use the term sonata in a lot of different ways, and it can be really confusing, and it's one of the things you've got to get in this focus on form. The sonata, definitions back here, it's a multi-movement work for solo piano or one instrument with piano accompaniment. But it's written for in this multi-movement cycle that is the Sonata Cycle. We use the Sonata Cycle everywhere, in the symphony, in the string quartet, in various chamber music, obviously in the sonata. But then we use the term sonata as a catch-all for the multi-movement thing, and the first movement form we refer to as sonata form, or if you're old like me, we actually call it sonata-allegro form, because in the first movement it was always fast. But we use that same single movement form, what we call sonata form, sometimes it's just called first movement form, which I think makes a lot more sense. We can use it in the second movement, we can use it in the last movement. So what you have here is a discussion of the entire sonata cycle, and that's what this chart shows you. And then you have all of the different single movement formats that make up this multi-movement structure. I love this. Look at how these pop up. To have sonata form, you got to have 3 things. You got to have the exposition, you got to have a development, you got to have a recapitulation. There you go. There they are right there. You also have the option in the first movement and the last movement of having a slow introduction, and sometimes people use it, sometimes they don't. And a coda, which is far more common, though technically considered optional. And it's just a little summing up. It's that final dissonance moving to the final consonant. And then it goes on and breaks down rondo form. You'll see that with Beethoven's Pathetique. You'll meet 2 great rondo forms, minuet trio, scherzo and trio, how that evolves You've got an example of that later in the chapter. Theme and variations, pretty self-explanatory. Very popular in the second movement, very popular in the last movement, particularly in concertos. That was a great way for a solo artist to show off with that orchestral accompaniment. Sonata rondo form's kind of crazy complicated, and I don't spend a lot of time with it for that purpose. If you get deep into this music, you'll start to discover it. It's a catch-all, and honestly, Mozart loved it. He used it time and again, and he never did it the same way twice. He's always messing with it, so it makes it a little more complicated. Then you start meeting the people. C.P.E. Bach, Johann Christian Bach, Stamitz, The Evolution of the Orchestra. You can read all about that, which is going to have a huge impact on Haydn, on Mozart, and on Beethoven. Later in the chapter, you have another focus on form, and this one deals specifically with the solo concerto. Now, the solo concerto is basically Sonata Cycle, but now it's for one solo instrument with a full orchestral accompaniment. Sonata, solo piano, or one solo instrument with piano accompaniment. Here, this is one solo instrument, usually a piano, a violin, oboe, flute. Those were the common instruments of the day. But anything. I mean, I'm older. I'm younger in terms of music, but I'm a tuba player. They write concertos for me now too. Insert your own joke there. But the concerto is a three-movement structure: a fast first movement, a slow second movement, a really fast dramatic third movement. But in the classical period, it had a couple of differences: the double exposition and the cadenza. You'll want to study the focus on form, and of course, you have a perfect example to study. Mozart's number 23 in A major. This is a classic, pardon the pun, classical concerto. And later on, we'll look at some other concertos, and you'll see how it evolves as we go into chapter 6, chapter 7, 8, and 9. So that's kind of cool. And then we deal with Beethoven. Beethoven is here in chapter 5 because he started his life as a classical composer, but he is very much a transitional composer. A lot of what he did musically belongs more in the next chapter, in chapter 6. We kept him all here in chapter 5 just for concision, to keep it concise and clear. That he's the end of that classical period, but he's also very much the beginning of the next period of the Romantic period. So you've got a couple of things here that are cool. You've got the Heiligenstadt Testament, which is basically a suicide note. He decided not to kill himself. They didn't find this until after he died. We tend to, I think, ascribe a little too much historical significance to it, but it's a neat story, and you can read all about it. And then you've got some dig deepers, and these will take you to some wonderful sites, a couple of good movies, lots of good books. This website is fascinating, and you'll see that overview. And again, back on Classic FM, fantastic stuff. All right, that's chapter 5, roughly 1750 to 1825 or so. And then we go to chapter 6. Chapter 6 is the Romantic period. It's the second half of this 150-year chunk that is roughly 1825 to 1900. Here, it's the same basic ideas, it's the same stuff. But now, each composer is going to seek that individual voice. They're going to look for the one thing that makes their music sound like them and like no one else. We're also going to see the rise of something called nationalism in this period. We'll also see opera just explode throughout the Romantic era. So all of that is stuff to keep an eye out on. And again, you've got a great Classic FM link here. You got 2 focus on form. Actually, there's 3 that you'll want to take a look at. One is the character pieces. These are individual little short pieces, and it's fascinating what happens in the Romantic period. Things get teeny tiny, things get ginormous, right? We go from little 30, 40-second solo individual piano pieces that are these character pieces to Wagner writing an 18-hour opera. So, bring a snack. It's long. But you can read about that here. You've got a great thing for Chopin and Franz Liszt. Some wonderful musical examples. I particularly enjoy this article. This is Victor Borga. Look him up on the internet. He was hilariously funny, but he was also a brilliant pianist. This is a chapter from his book about Franz Liszt. The trick with reading this is make sure you always read the footnotes. There are footnotes at the end of this, and you got to go back and forth, but that's where the jokes are buried. And these footnotes, really, this is where a lot of the humor is. It's kind of a pain. You got to zip back and forth, but it's absolutely worth it. Hilariously funny. There's something to focus on form. There's with tone poems, concert overtures, a lot of program music. This program music idea is going to come about quite a bit in the Romantic era. It becomes very popular. You want to spend some time with that. And then I mentioned opera. Opera with Mozart evolves into something that's new and different and is critical to the history of classical music. It explodes in the Romantic period. And there are tons of really important composers from the very first days of the Romantic period to Wagner and Puccini, who you'll meet in chapter 7, but he's kind of a romantic, making the transition into the 20th century. This is the core, this is the backbone of the opera repertoire. In opera, there's a great Mark Twain joke. It wasn't actually Twain that said it, but I'll just paraphrase. Opera's not near as bad as it sounds. The thing with opera is it takes a little bit of, you got to suspend reality, you know? People are going to come in and sing at you. You got to deal with that. But the music can be truly astounding. And of course, it's all in a foreign language. We as Americans who don't bother learning languages a lot of times, we struggle with that. But there's librettos. When you go to see a live opera, they've got the text translated into English. It's worth your effort. It's a different world. I could teach a whole semester just on romantic opera easily. You can spend lifetimes discovering this stuff. But it is worth your time. This focus on form gives you a very brief little thumbnail sketch, and you're going to see a little nationalism here too, because you're dealing with music from France, music, Austria and Germany, of course, Italy, Russia has some amazing music. And then the two powerhouses, Giuseppe Verdi from Italy, who's kind of the capstone culmination of everything romantic and romantic opera, and Wagner, the guy who breaks all the rules, the guy who changes everything. Wagner was a complex dude, and not the nicest man on the planet. You've got a really neat link here. For the first time ever, Bayreuth is canceled. This is tragic. We're in the middle of COVID-19. It will come back. Seattle Opera will come back. Save your money, but it's awesomely cool. You have a nice section here from Mike Walsh. Michael Walsh was a Time magazine music critic for a long time. He's a brilliant author. He wrote this book called Who's Afraid of Classical Music that I absolutely love. This is excerpted from here, and it gives you a very unvarnished, honest appraisal of Wagner, the man, Wagner, his music. What are you going to do? Wasn't the nicest guy, changed the world. So you can read about that here. One last thing that's covered here is Antonin Dvorak. And I don't have any listening guides for him. I really want to, but it just gets so long. I can't teach you everything. Some of you have to go discover yourself. But he has some symphonies, he has some string quartets, he has some operas that are all phenomenal. But I've included him here for that reason. It's great music. But two, he's one of the first guys who spent a really long time in America and had a big impact on American classical music. In particular, he kind of was the guy who said, you can have an American national voice. You can have your own nationalistic American music. In the late 1800s, he wrote this article for Harper's Magazine called Music in America. And the fascinating thing about it is, this is written in the late 1800s. We still have these discussions and arguments today about the world of art and music, particularly in America. He battled issues and problems that we still battle to this day with the National Endowment for the Arts and funding and public television, public radio, and all these things, and a search for a national voice. It's all still going on. There's a beautiful link between this, the Aaron Copland article you had in chapter 1, and some material we'll study in between chapters 9 and 10. There's a little interlude. And we're going to talk in that interlude at the end of the semester about arts issues and what's going on in the arts world today. This is a good start for it. Now, I will admit, this article is a little dry. It takes a little bit to get through. It is absolutely worth your time. And we will come back to this and discuss it again in between chapters 9 and 10. So there you go. There's chapters 5 and 6. The pieces are longer. The chapters are longer. This will take you a little more time. It is absolutely worth it, though, because like I say, we've been building this for a couple of weeks, and everything that happens here is going to take us through the rest of the semester. Enjoy. You're going to hear some fantastic music. I guarantee you're going to love some of it. There's some cool videos in the homework assignments. Enjoy. Have fun. See ya.